Excuses are the enemy of greatness because they quietly give you permission to stay where you are while convincing you that you deserve more. They sound reasonable, intelligent, even mature. They say the timing isn't right, the resources aren't enough, the support isn't there, the situation isn't fair. And the danger is not that excuses are loud, but that they are familiar. They speak in your own voice. They feel like logic. They feel like self-protection. But in reality, they are self-betrayal, repeated daily until potential turns into regret. Greatness requires ownership, and excuses exist to avoid it. The moment you explain instead of execute, you step away from responsibility. Blaming circumstances may feel relieving, but it weakens you. As long as the reason for your failure lives outside of you, the power to succeed does too. You can't grow beyond what you refuse to own. You can't rise above what you keep justifying. Excuses allow you to feel good about doing less, and over time, doing less becomes normal. Excuses also train your mind to look for escape instead of solutions. When a challenge appears, the first question should be, how do I make this work? But excuses rewire your thinking to ask, how do I get out of this? That habit is dangerous. It turns obstacles into stop signs instead of stepping stones. It teaches you to negotiate with effort, to bargain with discipline, to lower standards just enough to stay comfortable. And comfort is the greatest threat to greatness. Look closely at people who operate at elite levels. They face pressure, rejection, fatigue, fear, and uncertainty just like everyone else. The difference is not that they don't feel it, but that they don't use it as an excuse. They show up tired. They work while doubting themselves. They stay consistent when results are invisible. They understand that waiting to feel ready is a luxury average people can afford, not those chasing greatness. Excuses also protect the ego at the cost of the future. They make failure feel acceptable. They give you a story that sounds good enough to tell others and believable enough to tell yourself. Over time, that story becomes your identity. You become the person who almost did it, who could have done it, who would have done it if things were different. And the saddest part is that nothing external has to stop you anymore because the excuse has already done the job. Greatness demands discomfort, and excuses exist to avoid it. Growth feels awkward. Discipline feels boring. Consistency feels lonely. Excuses promise relief from that discomfort, but the relief is temporary and the cost is permanent. They keep you loyal to familiar pain instead of unfamiliar progress. They convince you that struggle is unfair, when in reality, struggle is the entry fee for transformation. Every excuse you repeat strengthens a belief. Every belief shapes a habit. Every habit builds a lifestyle. And one day you wake up living far below your potential, not because you failed once, but because you explained away 1,000 small opportunities to push harder, wake earlier, prepare better, stay longer, try again. None of them felt big in the moment. All of them mattered. Greatness begins when excuses start to sound weak to you, when your own explanations irritate you, when you stop needing perfect conditions to move, when responsibility feels heavy but empowering, because responsibility puts your future back in your hands. It forces honesty. It removes the safety net. And once excuses lose their power, effort becomes non-negotiable. Standards rise, urgency sharpens, discipline strengthens, and you start operating with intention instead of emotion, moving forward even when it hurts, even when no one is watching, even when progress feels slow, even when the old voice tries to pull you back into comfort and familiar reasons to stop. Excuses are the enemy of greatness because they slowly train you to accept a life that is smaller than your pote. Ow. They don't appear as weakness at first. They show up as explanations, as logic, as reasons that sound responsible and mature. They make you believe that once conditions improve, once people change, once timing becomes perfect, then you will finally show the world what you are capable of. But greatness never waits for perfect conditions. While you are explaining, life is moving, and every delay costs you momentum. The most dangerous thing about excuses is that they feel harmless in the moment. Skipping one workout doesn't seem like quitting. Avoiding one difficult conversation doesn't feel like fear. Postponing one decision doesn't look like failure. But greatness is not destroyed in one dramatic moment. It is eroded through small compromises that feel justified. Each excuse lowers your tolerance for discipline and raises your tolerance for comfort. And over time, comfort becomes your prison. Excuses also disconnect effort from outcome. When you rely on excuses, you start believing that results are controlled by things outside of you. The economy, the system, other people, your past, your luck. And the moment you believe success is external, effort becomes optional. Why push hard if the result isn't in your control? Why sacrifice if the outcome depends on someone else? That mindset kills hunger. It kills urgency. It kills the fire required to do the work when no one is forcing you. Greatness demands consistency, and excuses destroy consistency. They make discipline conditional. You work when you feel good. You show up when you're motivated. You push when it's convenient. But elite performers understand that consistency is built on decisions, not emotions. They move even when tired. They focus even when distracted. They execute even when confidence is low. Excuses try to convince you that waiting is wise, but waiting weakens your edge. Excuses also shape identity. The words you repeat become the person you believe you are. When you constantly say you don't have time, you become someone who never makes time. When you say you're not ready, you become someone who never prepares fully. When you say it's too late, you become someone who stops trying. Over time, excuses stop being something you use and start being who you are, and breaking that identity becomes harder than breaking a habit. There is a difference between reasons and excuses. Reasons acknowledge reality and demand adjustment. Excuses acknowledge reality and demand surrender. Greatness comes from adjusting, not surrendering. The situation may be unfair. The timing may be difficult. The resources may be limited, but greatness asks a different question. Given this reality, what must I do anyway? Excuses ask how to escape. Greatness asks how to adapt. Pain exposes excuses. When things get hard, excuses get louder. The body gets tired. The mind gets uncomfortable. Fear starts speaking clearly. That is the moment when greatness is decided. Not when everything is easy, but when quitting feels justified. Excuses offer relief. Discipline demands endurance. One feels better now. The other builds power later. Most people choose relief and call it self-care, not realizing they are training themselves to avoid pressure. Excuses also delay self-respect. Deep down, you know when you could have done more. You feel it when you go to sleep. You feel it when you see someone else succeed with less opportunity, but more commitment. No amount of explanation silences that inner voice forever. It waits. And over time, regret becomes heavier than effort ever was. When excuses lose their influence, responsibility becomes unavoidable. Responsibility is uncomfortable because it removes hiding places. It forces you to admit that progress is your job, that preparation is your responsibility, that consistency is your obligation, that no one is coming to save you. And that realization is frightening, but it is also empowering, because the moment responsibility is accepted, action becomes possible. Standards rise. Discipline sharpens, focus increases, effort intensifies, and you begin to operate with urgency instead of delay, with intention instead of reaction, with commitment instead of explanation. Discipline beats motivation every time, because motivation is emotional and discipline is structural. Motivation depends on how you feel when you wake up, how inspired you are, how confident you feel in that moment. Discipline does not ask how you feel. It asks what must be done. Motivation is powerful but temporary. Discipline is quiet but permanent. When motivation fades, discipline remains, and greatness is built in the moments when motivation disappears. Motivation comes from external triggers, a speech, a video, a win, a compliment, a moment of excitement. But once the noise fades, so does the energy. Discipline comes from internal decisions made in advance. It is built when you decide your standards before pressure arrives. When the alarm goes off and your body wants comfort, discipline moves your feet. When distractions are everywhere, discipline locks your focus. When fear shows up, discipline keeps you executing anyway. The problem with relying on motivation is that life is unpredictable. Some days you will feel unstoppable. Other days you will feel empty, tired, and unsure. If your performance depends on motivation, your results will be inconsistent. Discipline creates consistency. It turns effort into a habit instead of an event. It removes negotiation. You don't ask if you should do the work. You already decided. That decision protects you from excuses and emotional fluctuations. Discipline also creates confidence. Confidence is not built by hype. It is built by evidence. Every time you do what you said you would do, even when you didn't feel like it, you gain self-respect. That self-respect becomes belief. Motivation tries to convince you that you can do it. Discipline proves it. Over time, proof beats persuasion. You no longer need to be inspired because you trust yourself. Motivation is reactive. Discipline is proactive. Motivation waits for the right feeling. Discipline creates the right conditions. It understands that feelings follow action, not the other way around. Most people wait to feel ready before they start. Disciplined people start before they feel ready and let the movement generate momentum. Once momentum builds, motivation often follows, but it is no longer required. Discipline is also what separates separates professionals from amateurs. Amateurs perform when it's exciting. Professionals perform when it's boring. Greatness is not built in dramatic moments. It is built in repetitive, unglamorous work done consistently over time. Motivation loves excitement. Discipline survives monotony. It shows up on ordinary days and turns them into extraordinary outcomes. Discipline demands sacrifice. It requires saying no to comfort, distractions, and short-term pleasure. Motivation encourages you when it feels good. Discipline pushes you when it feels inconvenient. That push is uncomfortable, but it is also necessary. Growth lives on the other side of resistance. Every disciplined action strengthens your ability to endure discomfort. Over time, what once felt hard becomes normal and your capacity expands. Motivation can lie. It tells you that you will start tomorrow, that you deserve a break, that missing one day won't matter. Discipline tells the truth. It understands that small actions compound, that consistency multiplies effort, that every missed commitment weakens the system you are trying to build. Discipline protects the process, even when progress is slow. Discipline also creates freedom. At first, it feels restrictive, schedules, routine, structure, but that structure creates control. It removes chaos. It reduces decision fatigue. It allows you to focus energy where it matters. Over time, discipline gives you options. It gives you confidence. It gives you leverage. While others are controlled by moods and circumstances, disciplined people control themselves. Motivation starts fires. Discipline keeps them burning. One excites the mind, the other builds the life. When pressure hits, when energy drops, when enthusiasm fades, discipline carries you forward, sharpens your habits, strengthens your character, raises your standards, deepens your focus, and keeps you moving with intention day after day, long after motivation has disappeared. Your standards define your future because they determine what you accept, what you tolerate, and what you repeatedly allow into your life. Talent may open doors, opportunity may create chances, but standards decide whether you walk through those doors or walk away. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your standards. Whatever you permit consistently becomes your normal, and your normal becomes your destiny. Standards are revealed in small choices, not big announcements. They show up in how you manage your time when no one is watching, how you prepare when the pressure is low, how you respond when things don't go your way. If you tolerate being late, you become late. If you tolerate excuses, you become unreliable. If you tolerate half effort, you become average. Standards don't lie. They quietly shape who you are long before success or failure becomes visible. Low standards feel harmless at first because they make life easier. They remove pressure. They reduce accountability. They allow comfort to take priority over growth. But ease is expensive. The price is paid later in regret, missed opportunities, and unrealized potential. High standards feel heavy at the beginning because they demand discipline, sacrifice, and consistency. But they pay dividends over time in confidence, progress, and control. Your future is built on what you refuse to compromise. When standards are high, excuses lose their influence. You no longer negotiate with yourself about effort. You no longer need external motivation to perform. Your standards become your internal authority. They tell you how to show up regardless of mood, circumstance, or convenience. They turn discipline into identity rather than obligation. Standards also influence the people and environments you allow around you. If you tolerate negativity, distraction, and mediocrity, they will shape your mindset. If you demand focus, honesty, and growth, they will elevate your thinking. You don't need to fight every battle. You need to set standards that prevent certain battles from entering your life in the first place. What you allow around you eventually becomes what you become. Many people confuse standards with perfection. High standards do not mean never failing. They mean never settling. Failure with high standards leads to adjustment and improvement. Failure with low standards leads to excuses and repetition. High standards create resilience because they demand responsibility. They force you to ask what you could do better instead of who to blame. Standards also determine how you respond to pressure. When standards are low, pressure feels unfair and overwhelming. When standards are high, pressure feels expected. You understand that growth requires resistance. You stop seeing struggle as punishment and start seeing it as preparation. That shift changes everything. Instead of avoiding difficulty, you lean into it because it aligns with who you've decided to be. Raising your standards often means becoming uncomfortable with your old self. It means outgrowing habits, routines, and relationships that once felt normal. That discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is evidence that your future is pulling you away from your past. Most people avoid raising standards because they fear losing familiarity, but familiarity is often the very thing holding them back. Your standards speak louder than your words. You can say you want success, but your daily standards reveal the truth. You can say you want Ralph, But your tolerance for comfort tells a different story. The future you experience will not be determined by what you hope for, but by what you consistently demand of yourself. When standards rise, behavior follows. When behavior changes, results change. When results improve, belief strengthens. And that belief reinforces higher standards. It becomes a cycle that builds momentum. Over time, what once required effort becomes automatic. Excellence stops feeling forced and starts feeling natural. And that is when your future begins to reflect the level of discipline, integrity, focus, and commitment that your standards quietly enforce every single day. Responsibility makes you dangerous because the moment you stop blaming everything outside of you, you reclaim your power. As long as your struggles are someone else's fault, your growth depends on someone else changing. Responsibility ends that dependence. It forces you to look inward instead of outward. It removes excuses, distractions, and hiding places. And when there's nowhere left to hide, action becomes inevitable. Most people avoid responsibility because it is heavy. It demands honesty. It exposes gaps in effort, discipline, and preparation. It strips away comforting stories and replaces them with uncomfortable truths. But that weight is exactly what builds strength. Responsibility is pressure, and pressure builds capacity. When you accept full responsibility for your life, you stop waiting for permission, validation, or rescue. You become self-directed, self-correcting, and relentless. Dangerous people are not reckless. They are accountable. They understand that every result in their life is connected to a decision they made or avoided. That awareness sharpens focus. Instead of reacting emotionally, they analyze strategically. Instead of complaining, they adjust. Responsibility trains the mind to ask better questions. Not why did this happen to me, but what must I do now? That question changes everything. Responsibility also removes fear's control. Fear feeds on uncertainty and excuses. When you take responsibility, fear loses leverage because you are no longer waiting for perfect conditions. You move with what you have. You act before you feel ready. You understand that clarity comes from action, not from thinking. That forward movement creates momentum, and momentum weakens fear. Taking responsibility means accepting that no one owes you anything. That truth is uncomfortable, but it is freeing. When you stop expecting fairness, you start creating progress. You stop measuring effort against rewards and start measuring it against standards. You work because it is required, not because it is rewarded. That mindset separates dangerous individuals from dependent ones. Responsibility also strengthens discipline. When everything is your responsibility, consistency is no longer optional. You stop making emotional decisions. You stop negotiating with effort. You understand that your future is being shaped by daily choices, not by intentions. That awareness creates urgency. Every day matters. Every decision counts. Every action compounds. Many people confuse responsibility with guilt. Responsibility is not self-punishment. It is self-leadership. It does not say you are bad. It says you are capable. It says you have influence. It says your actions matter. Guilt paralyzes. Responsibility mobilizes. It pushes you to respond instead of retreat. Responsibility also makes you adaptable. When you own outcomes, you stop defending mistakes and start correcting them. You don't waste energy proving you were right. You invest energy becoming better. That flexibility makes you dangerous in changing environments. While others are stuck explaining the past, you are building the future. When responsibility becomes your default, confidence grows quietly. Not loud confidence, but grounded confidence. The kind that comes from knowing you can handle pressure because you have done it. E4. You have faced discomfort and survived. You have failed and adjusted. You have committed and followed through. That evidence builds unshakable belief. Dangerous people don't wait for motivation because responsibility doesn't need motivation. It needs action. They don't wait for approval because responsibility doesn't seek validation. They don't wait for perfect timing because responsibility understands that time moves regardless. They move with intention, aware that inaction is also a decision. When you fully accept responsibility, you become difficult to control, difficult to manipulate, difficult to stop. Circumstances lose their authority over you. Other people's opinions lose their grip. Excuses lose their voice. What remains is focus, discipline, ownership, and action. And when those elements align in one individual, progress accelerates, standards rise, habits sharpen, effort intensifies, and life begins to respond to the energy of someone who no longer waits to be saved, but chooses to lead themselves forward regardless of resistance, discomfort, or uncertainty. Average ends where commitment begins because commitment removes options. Average survives on flexibility, on the ability to quit, pause, delay, or lower the standard when things become uncomfortable. Commitment closes those doors. It draws a line between who you used to be and who you are becoming. The moment commitment is made, average loses its hiding place because commitment demands consistency, not convenience. Most people mistake interest for commitment. Interest is excited at the start. It shows up when the energy is high and the results feel close. Commitment stays when the excitement disappears. It remains when progress is slow, when effort feels heavy, when nobody is watching. Average people work until it hurts. Committed people work through the hurt. That difference is where transformation happens. Commitment requires responsibility, and responsibility makes you dangerous. When you commit, you stop outsourcing your future. You no longer wait for motivation, permission, or perfect timing. You take ownership of outcomes, knowing that success and failure are both teachers. That ownership sharpens your focus. It forces you to prepare instead of hope. It forces you to execute instead of explain. Average lives in excuses. Commitment lives in decisions. Average asks how hard this will be. Commitment asks what it will take. Average looks for shortcuts. Commitment builds systems. Average avoids pressure. Commitment understands that pressure reveals character. Once commitment is present, discipline becomes non-negotiable. You don't ask if you feel like showing up. You show up because that is who you decided to be. Commitment also changes how you experience pain. For average minds, pain is a signal to stop. For committed minds, pain is feedback. It tells you where to strengthen, where to adjust, where to improve. Commitment doesn't eliminate discomfort. It redefines it. Instead of seeing discomfort as a threat, you see it as proof that you are stretching beyond old limits. Responsibility strengthens commitment because it removes blame. When you accept responsibility, you stop wasting energy defending your situation. You invest that energy into changing it. You don't wait for someone else to understand you. You make yourself undeniable through effort. That mindset makes you dangerous because it cannot be controlled by circumstances. Commitment also reshapes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who finishes. That shift changes how you think, how you speak, and how you act. Your standards rise because quitting no longer fits your self-image. Consistency becomes part of who you are, not something you struggle to maintain. Average people manage time. Committed people manage priorities. Commitment forces you to say no to distractions, comfort, and temporary pleasure. It demands sacrifice. It demands focus. That sacrifice is not punishment. It is investment. Every committed action deposits value into your future. Even when the return is delayed, responsibility makes commitment powerful because it creates urgency. You understand that every day you delay is a day you never get back. You understand that potential unused becomes potential wasted. That awareness creates intensity, not reckless intensity, but focused intensity. The kind that shows up daily, steadily, without drama. Commitment also builds trust with yourself. Each time you honor a commitment, your confidence grows. Not because you feel inspired, but because you prove reliable. That reliability becomes self-respect, and self-respect fuels momentum. You stop needing external validation because your actions validate you. Average ends the moment you decide that excuses are no longer acceptable. Responsibility makes that decision real. When commitment and responsibility work together, you become consistent, disciplined, and resilient. You stop reacting to life and start directing it. You stop waiting for change and start creating it. You become dangerous, not because you are aggressive, but because you are accountable, focused, and relentless, moving forward with intention, executing with discipline, raising standards daily, and refusing to return to a level of effort that once felt acceptable but no longer fits who you have committed to becoming.